Hello, my name is Angel and welcome back to my booktube channel. I am freshly showered and in my pajamas, so I'm sorry if I look a little bit of a mess, but I wanted to film my September reading wrap-up. I read 7 books in the month of September, which is a little bit low for me, but it is still a good amount of books. One of the books I read is like 650 pages, so I'm not really upset about it or anything. I don't think it matters how many books a person reads. I guess I should clarify that. I read a sort of diverse series of books, and I'm gonna tell you guys about them. So the first book I read, I actually do not have with me because I already loaned it to my mother-in-law and father-in-law. That book is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda. This is a very popular and well-known YA historical romance. It follows Chinese American teenage girls set in the 1950s during the communist scare area. I don't know a whole lot about American history, despite me being an American. So I don't know that much about that era. It's a queer historical romance, if I didn't already say that a second ago. I rated this book a 4 stars. It was very good. It was very close to a 5 for me. We follow our main character as a teenager, basically discovering her queerness. I would say that's what a lot of the book is about. She has to discover her own identity and how that relates to herself and her family and her Chinese heritage. She develops a relationship with another girl that goes to her school, sort of through these trips to the Telegraph Club. So it's a gay bar, essentially. And I don't think I should say anything else about the plot, because I want to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, and I do think I'm pretty bad at describing books despite me wanting to have a booktube channel, so I'm going to work on that. The only things I didn't like about it were a couple times throughout the book we switched perspectives to following her aunt and somebody else, and I found those chapters incredibly boring. I didn't really feel like they added that much to the book. I sort of understand why they were put in there, but every time we switched perspective, I was just waiting for us to get back to the character that I actually cared about. So yeah, that was The Last Night at the Telegraph Club. I would definitely recommend it. I'm pretty sure it's won quite a few awards too. So yeah, Last Night at the Telegraph Club. The next book I read is called A Scatter of Light. I do have that one with me, so that is this book. A Scatter of Light is by Malinda, and it's actually the reason I found out about The Last Night at the Telegraph Club, because I was scrolling through book recommendations and read the synopsis for A Scatter of Light, and then found out that it was marketed as a companion novel to The Last Night at the Telegraph Club. So I was like, if I'm going to read A Scatter of Light, I should read the companion novel that takes place before it. This book takes place in 2015, I believe. This is set on the background of when gay marriage was being legalized across the United States. So that's our backdrop. We're again following a queer American teenage girl struggling with identity and her culture, and this book also features a lot of issues with familial relationships. She has a difficult relationship with her mother. She is having some issues with her father. She is currently living with her grandmother during the process of the book. So she's kind of going through it for a 17-year-old. I gave this book a 3 stars because as much as the writing is still good, because it's still the same author as the last book, it features a trope that I don't want to say what the trope is because it's a spoiler. But if you've read this book, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And I just cannot get behind that trope. I don't care that she's 17 and discovering who she is and stuff. I'm only 21, and at 17, I knew that those actions were not morally correct, okay? So I feel for her, I feel for our main character. I know it sucks to discover your own identity if I haven't made it clear, and you can't tell by my blue hair and stuff like that. I am a queer person. So I get it, but it is definitely not as good as the first one, and I also think the marketing of it being a companion novel it's just marketing. They're not companion novels. You do not need to read The Last Night at the Telegraph Club to read this book. I actually would recommend that you read The Last Night at the Telegraph Club and tell you that A Scatter of Light is Escape. The only connection is we find out at some point in the book, this might be a mild spoiler, so jump ahead a little bit if you don't want to know. We find out at some point in the book that she has a very, very distant familial connection to one of our characters from the first book. That's it. And they're both set in San Francisco. It was okay. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm probably going to hold on to it for now just because I have the first one, but I might end up donating this one because I don't think I need to keep it. The next book I read in September was Emily Henry's A Happy Place. After I read it, I left it in my window with a different book sitting on top of it, and so the part that didn't have a book on top of it has like sun damage now. So I sun damaged my Emily Henry book, which is a little sad, but I'm not that upset about it. You can see on the back too. I've read all of her other books except for her most recent one, Funny Story. I gave Happy Place a 4. I've given most of her other books a 4. I think it was good. I didn't think it was mind-blowing. That's how I feel about most of her books. Emily Henry has very good writing. There's a lot of good banter. This book has a pretty big cast. There's 6 main characters, or 6 really characters at the forefront. We have a queer couple. We have characters of different like backgrounds and ethnicities. It's a really good book. The trope, the synopsis, if you're unfamiliar with the synopsis for Happy Place, is Win and Harriet, our main couple, were engaged, and a few months before the start of the book, they called off their engagement. We don't know why at the beginning, and they have not told their friend group yet because they didn't want to upset anybody or like stir the pot, I guess. And now it is time for their yearly group vacation, and they have to pretend they're still dating, still engaged during the book. So it's kind of like a forced proximity, second chance, fake dating, all of those things at the same time. I don't have any super real critiques. It just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. So, but I'd still recommend it if you like silly romance books. Emily Henry does include, silly might be the wrong word for Emily Henry specifically, because Emily Henry is the type of romance author who she throws in some heavier topics. Nothing I think super like trigger warning worthy, but they're not just... I'm reading the XX right now. You'll see that in the next video probably. And that book is pure silly. I don't think the author's trying to do anything other than silly. Happy Place has other things going on. So, that was Happy Place. I gave it a 4. the next book I read was my 650 something page chonker of a book, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. Let me start by saying the only reason this book did not get a 5-star is because I am a bitter and cynical person. The ending of this book, I think, was amazing, okay? And it probably genuinely is the best ending for the book. But it wasn't what I wanted to happen. And so when I first finished it, I had a little bit of like a bitter feeling, and so I gave it a 4 instead of a 5. I sometimes think about changing it. Maybe I will someday. So what is The Bee Sting about, you may be asking? The Bee Sting is following the Barnes family, who are dealing with a lot of trouble right now, mostly financial trouble. So it's the father, the mother, and the daughter and son. We follow each of them throughout the book at different parts. I believe we start off with the daughter's perspective. We see the mother's perspective, the father's perspective, the son's. We see all the perspectives. And I really feel that this book is about uncertainty. It's about, troubles happening in your life, and what the hell are you supposed to do? Maybe there's nothing you're supposed to do. It's about making bad decisions and having to live with bad consequences. It's about hiding parts of yourself or feeling like you can't talk to people that you should be able to talk to. I think the ending of the book really highlights that message of uncertainty that is present throughout the book. It's really beautiful. It's written really well. There are a lot of heavy subjects talked about in this book. I think this might be one that people would want trigger warnings for. If you are concerned, maybe look it up. I didn't find it too hard to deal with, but some parts of the book I could see people being uncomfortable with. Another thing about this book that I feel like people should be aware of is that as we're following each character, I feel like the writing style changes pretty distinctly, and that's great to me because then we really feel like we're following that character. However, when we follow the mother, the writing style is very stream of consciousness, like kind of difficult to get into, where our author sort of forgoes punctuation. It's done for a reason. I think it's done really well, but it is hard when we switch to the perspective of the mother. I found it kind of difficult to switch into that perspective. But I think it was done well, and I really think it added to her part of the book. But it is a large portion of the book. I would say like 250 pages or so is this stream of consciousness, very little to no punctuation style. And I would be warned, because I think that could turn some people off of this book. So just be careful if you want to read it. But I think it's really great, and I think it's a banger of a book. I'm kind of interested in reading his other novel now. It's supposed to be really good. So yeah, The Bee Sting. The next book I read is The Good Left Undone by Adriana Trigiani. I don't know how to say her last name for sure. I didn't really like this book. It's not bad, it's just not for me. I'll explain. I think I settled on giving it a 3. I credit this book for the reason I read less books than I normally do. For some perspective, it took me about 4 days, 4.5 days to read this book. And it took me 10 to read The Good Left Undone, because I found it really boring. Something I need to get a lot better at is DNFing books, like not finishing books. I have only not finished one book this year because I hated that book. I have a hard time not finishing books when I think they're just okay, because I keep thinking, well, what if it gets better? And then it didn't get better. So, this book is set in it's set in World War II in the 1940s. It follows two perspectives. So the first perspective is present day, with our character Matilda, and she is an 80-year-old grandma. We see her relationship with her daughter, her granddaughter, that kind of thing. And then our other perspective is Matilda's mother, Dominica, back in the 1940s during World War II. During Dominica's perspective, her story is very compelling to me. She was an Italian nurse who, at the time, nursing and stuff like that is controlled by the church. So you see her as a kid, and you see a friendship she makes and things like that. And really, we're just following her life. But some of the challenges she faces include, because nursing is controlled by the church, she does something during her nursing that the church does not like. And so to keep her nursing certification, she is sent to work in France and then Scotland, I believe, and Italy, if you do not know, was not on the same side as France and Scotland during the war. So she's sent away before the war, and then the war starts. So she is cut off from her parents and her friends back in Italy, and that's a challenge and stuff like that. And so we basically just follow her life story. I found it very compelling. I found it very interesting. But then Dominica's story would be chopped up by these chapters following Matilda in the present, and those chapters were just kind of excruciatingly boring to get through. Matilda's kind of a bitter old lady. She's mean to her granddaughter, and she's mean to her daughter. And we don't know why, because Dominica's story doesn't explain that, because Dominica's storyline for us ends. We only see Dominica's storyline up until when Matilda is about 5 years old. And so we don't know why Matilda is the way that she is. She has a lot of health problems in the book. We don't know where those health problems come from. Dominica was a very healthy woman. It's just odd. It's just so strange. I don't understand why the choices that were made by the author were made. But I gave it a 3, and I kind of feel like that was a pretty generous 3, but it was not for me. The next book I read in the month of September is considered a classic. It is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. The Secret Life of Bees is another historical fiction. I kind of read a lot of historical fiction. I've noticed it's not super always on purpose. It's just, I guess those are the books I pick up. The character we're following in The Secret Life of Bees is a 14-year-old white girl. It takes place in 1964, so that is during the time in the United States when the Civil Rights Act was being passed. So she is a 14-year-old white girl living in, I think it's South Carolina. I don't remember. Yes, South Carolina. And I would say overall the book is about defining what family means to you, what motherhood means to you, and what like womanhood means to you. Our character, her name is Lily. Lily's mother passes away when she is 4 years old, and then her father hires a black woman to be her nanny, and this black woman becomes her. Let me check what her name is as well. I forget. I'm so bad at things like this. Rosaline. Rosaline becomes Lily's like pseudo mother figure. She's her nanny. She takes care of her all of the time, and she's also their housekeeper and stuff like that. Something happens, and Lily and Rosaline go on the run and end up staying with 3 other black women who are all sisters. And we follow the friendships that are formed. We follow Lily learning information about her mother, learning information about herself, and there are also moments throughout the book where she kind of has to deal with some prejudices she had because, you know, she's raised by, I mean, she's raised by Rosaline, but it's 1964. So a 14-year-old in 1964 is gonna think what, like, what other people think. 14 is you're learning what your own opinions are, but you don't fully have your own opinions. So sometimes she has negative thoughts, like racist thoughts about the black people in her life, and she sort of has to check those thoughts sometimes and realize, like, these people are great. They treat her better than most of the white people she knows. So I do think this is a very good book. I think the bees throughout the book, the women she lives with, they keep bees. The bee metaphors are really well done. If you don't know, basically every bee you see is a lady because the male bees sort of only exist to reproduce. So all of the worker bees you see are female, and then everyone knows there's a queen bee. So the bee metaphors are really well done for our metaphors of like motherhood and sisterhood and womanhood. And I would recommend it. This is one where it made me tear up a little bit, so be careful. The only reason it got a 4 instead of a 5 for me, I'm very picky, and that's not a flex. Let me tell you, a lot of people on BookTube will say they're picky about their 5s, and they say it like it's a flex. It is not a flex. It just means that I have trouble letting myself like feel complete joy, I think. So the only reason this book didn't get a 5 is because there's a character towards the end of the book that I feel like is given forgiveness, I guess, and they don't deserve forgiveness, in my opinion. I don't think forgiveness is necessary to like heal and move on, and I think it's possible to sort of like empathize with things that have happened to a person to make them do bad actions, but we should not pretend that that excuses the bad actions. And I feel like this book, instead of just empathizing, excused, and excusing is not acceptable, and I hope that makes sense. But I would still recommend it. I think that's just a me problem. Okay, and then the final book I read in September, the 7th book I read in September, is Madwoman by Chelsea Bieker, or Bieker maybe, I'm not sure. Madwoman on Goodreads, it is classified as like a mystery thriller, and I would say that's wrong. I would say this book is a literary fiction book with mystery and thriller like elements to it. I think if you go into this book thinking it's a mystery or thinking it's a thriller, you will be disappointed. I gave this book a 4, but it kind of feels like a generous 4. I go back and forth lowering it to a 3. So Madwoman is about a woman who is worried she is going crazy. You follow her in the present where she is, she has a lot of secrets, and she's worried these secrets will be revealed to her family, her husband, and her children. And if these secrets are revealed, she is worried it will blow up her entire life. I don't want to say much more about the actual plot because I do think the reveals are the only parts that make this book compelling, so I think I'll keep the plot pretty vague. My issue with this book is that it is, let me check, it's like a little bit over 300 pages, that's not the issue. The issue is like the first 70 pages of this book and like the last 70 pages of this book are super interesting, super fast paced. I felt like on edge, like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? But then there's like 150, more than 150 pages in the middle where like nothing happens. For like the entire middle section of this book, nothing happens. And I was kind of concerned that I was like missing the point. I was like a little concerned that I was like not getting it. And after finishing it, I don't think it was a me problem. I just think that's the way the book was written. And that's fine. But it definitely wasn't for, I don't like how slow it was in the middle. It wasn't for me. So yeah, I gave it a generous 4. I think I would recommend it if you don't care when books are slow, but if that will bother you, then it might be a skip. To close out the video here, that is all of the books I read in September. It was a pretty good reading month. I didn't have any like 2s or 1s or anything. I don't frequently have 2s or 1s. I rate most books 3 and 4. I think according to Goodreads, my average rating is like a 3.6 or something like that. It doesn't super matter. So that's it. I'll say one more thing. I do have my Goodreads like linked on my YouTube channel, and it should be linked in the description as well. I update my Goodreads as I read. I update it every day if I've read. And I leave like written reviews for books when I finish them. So if you're ever interested in following me on Goodreads, I'll probably follow you back. I don't use most social media, that's why there's no other social media linked on my channel, but I would love to have Goodreads friends because I want to see what y'all are reading too, and I want to see what reviews you're leaving and what ratings you're reading. So please follow me or friend me on Goodreads, and I will friend you back. I want friends. So thanks for watching my video, and I will see you guys next time.